Welcome to another episode of Armchair CMOs. It's your boy, B Moss here.
I'm Jules. Hey everybody, welcome back.
Welcome
We
back.
took we
Welcome.
took a break and we're back. Welcome back.
There's a lot going on. And we had an intense run the last couple episodes with some very important we did Super Bowl and NBA All-Star back to back, which were heavy topics in terms of not the subject matter, but just how much we had to talk about. But February was crazy. And March Madness is here. So perfect time to come back after taking a little break. Also important to know, Jules, this is the first Armchair CMOs episode that's officially presented by Moss Brand Management Marketing and Events. So
Oh, we have
excited
a
about
sponsor.
that.
Is that our first sponsor?
It's not really
Wow,
a
what
sponsorship,
do you want to do it?
it's more like the production company. You know?
Hmm. I think I was about to have more fun if we call it a sponsor. I was gonna offer you a 30-second ad read.
No, I
Do you
mean,
have like a producer? Do you have Moss Brand Management producer tag?
I'll just put the logo up and post and then have it linked to the website or something like that. But yeah, that is the company that I run, that officially produces this podcast, among other things, which we won't have to we have to get into those right now. But
No, we can spend 30 seconds. I rolled my eyes at you not having a producer tag, but it is exciting. I'm excited for you. You're gonna do lots of cool stuff.
yes,
You're
so
already working on stuff.
Moss Brand Management literally is just the umbrella incubator for whatever I want to do creatively. And then from a marketing standpoint, it's basically just designed to help people that I know with their support, like whatever they need in marketing, but also whatever ideas or events or things that I want to do, which includes the creative endeavors like this podcast and the other podcasts that I have. But still, my background obviously is in sports marketing, so still being available to people, in the sports industry, especially those in college athletics who need support or need help in marketing or ideas and branding and digital media for me to be able to help. And excited about it. Got some things that I'm hoping to announce over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to that. Follow us on Instagram, Moss Brand Management, and then the website is mossbrandmanagement.com. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. There was your 30-second ad read.
All right, let's get into it. I know enough about me, guys. Enough about me. So our first topic, we're gonna go winners and losers today. Well, not winners, but a winner and a loser, and then we have a big topic that obviously is important and relevant to right now. Starting with the loser. So last week, hilarious. I mean, hilarious not the right word, but it was funny for some people. I thought it was unfortunate. Um,
Yeah.
Big news
It's
from
a it's a,
MLB. Go ahead.
a win for the people who find it funny,
Yes, if you're into
but
that
a
type of
loser for everybody else.
you're into that kind of humor and you thought it was hilarious, here's the story. So Major League Baseball and Fanatics New Era released a new run of hats that basically took the logo, the primary logo, and overlapped it on top of their word mark. And what happened was that some of them created a word that was either inappropriate or close to being inappropriate. So specifically, I think the Astros one wrote out asshos, ASHOS, which is, pretty close to assholes, which is not cool. And then
Also, assholes is still a weird word, if nothing else.
the other one was the Angels of Anaheim, which is so many words anyway, but it looked like anal, but it was spelled ANAELS, which is like also not cool. But the most unfortunate one to me is the Texas Rangers. Theirs spelled out the word Tetas, which in Spanish translates into breasts, um, which is super unfortunate. And it's obviously the most unfortunate to me because obviously Texas, the team in Texas has probably got not only a huge Hispanic population in the state, but I'm sure that overlaps. There's a huge Hispanic population in their fan base that is either super offended or laughing and joking because they think it's hilarious and they're laughing at the people who made these. But overall, not a good look. They had to pull them from sale. Um, there are people who got a few of them that have them on eBay and they're selling them for thousands of dollars, which is also crazy, which just shows the people who think this kind of stuff is funny, like are really taking that to the bank. And then it's also unfortunate just because Major Baseball's had a couple of these type of issues back to back. So last year they had issues with another hat that was like different replications of an A's logo in different placements, but the placements spelled the word ass on the hat, which was unfortunate. And then on top of that, last year when they launched their new jerseys and uniforms with Nike, there's issues with them being see-through and not having good quality. So bad luck for MLB over the past couple years in this space. And I look at it from a business and marketing standpoint too, right? Like hats in MLB are kind of like jerseys in most other sports, where like you can get more money from the hats than you do from jersey sales. So like it's on them to be creative and try to figure out more ways to get new hats and new versions of those hats to get people to keep buying them. So I appreciate and respect them trying to like be creative and try to figure out ways to create new product, but just a tough situation to not really think that all the way through.
Yeah, add this to a list of marketing campaigns or ideas that you're like, how did this get out of the room without like some proper QA? Like who didn't see these things coming? But yeah. I mean, they pulled them quickly. Hopefully it's like minimal backlash. But definitely like the loser of the week, I think.
Yeah, tough, very tough.
Do we want to transition into the winner of the week?
What you got?
Okay. All right, so I think the winner of the week is Flau'Jae's Experian campaign. She had like an NIL deal with Experian, where Experian, if it doesn't immediately ring a bell, is like the credit card, credit score, check company, one of the three. Experian, like alongside Flau'Jae in this campaign, is repaying
Hold on, we can't get killed because we gotta say her name. Flau'Jae.
Flau'Jae. Is that right? Okay, sorry.
I'll
um,
cut that part out. Say Flaw.
I what?
I said I'll cut it out. I'll edit it out.
Oh, you don't have to. Um, I don't mind. I mean, I want to get a name right. I like was Googling earlier and it's like everything said she's kind of fine, whatever. Like she doesn't correct people. So I was like, okay, I'll just do my best. Flau'Jae. Um, alongside Experian are paying back $5 million of debt of like Louisiana families. So they're picking like 5,000 families in Louisiana and helping them pay back their debts, just as a part of this marketing campaign, as a way of like doing good for the community. I think that this is the winner of the week for like a host of reasons. I think there's a few trends in particular that I think made this a really good move for Experian. One is just that like Flau'Jae was the right person for this campaign. She's talked about financial literacy in the past. She's like from Louisiana. Um, they're targeting the like Louisiana families, and she's going to connect well with her. Like it makes more sense to do it in her home state as opposed to like picking somewhere else in the country or even like running a national campaign. But then like some broader macro trends that I think are relevant are like there's a lot of declining trust in this kind of like influencer type of partnership culture, where influencers used to be a place where there's like high levels of trust between the consumer and the brand, but like through the influencer. I think that's like declining despite all the excitement right now about like female athletes, and like movement towards them in this space. I think there's a lot of distrust happening right now between like US consumers and brands across the country, just given like the broader political climate. And I think this especially applies to any companies in like a financial environment. Like there or like there's a looming recession. A lot of folks have been going through like a lot of economic hardship since COVID. And so I think that this is a way for Experian to like really build trust back and say like, hey, we see these families like might be struggling with paying back their debt, and we're going to put our money where our mouth is, like quite literally, and help them pay it back. Um, so I just thought this was a really good win, like a lot of alignment. A lot of like actually taking action to stand behind what they're saying they value, or like what they're going to do. I think there's a lot of like posturing right now from companies, and that's why like consumer trust is declining. But this feels a little bit less like posturing and a little bit more like them actually trying to do something. Um, so I don't know. I loved this. I thought this was a win for both Flau'Jae and Experian.
Yeah. I mean, I think that from our standpoint, from a marketing branding standpoint, interesting. I'd be interested to know like so let's also mention like she's been a partner with Experience since last year, I think. So this is a obviously good to see that she still got a partnership with them. It wasn't like a 1 year deal thing. I think it's important to know that Experian is partnering with some company called Forgive Co. or something like that, who's actually going to be the person that's
Like
giving the
carrying it out.
something. Yeah, but obviously, like, be interested to figure out what the numbers are, right? Of who's doing what and who's getting what, right? Like, I feel like I think to me, it would make sense if Forgive Co. is just the vehicle to do the forgiveness. Great. They're partnering with Experian to get visibility about them doing it, and then Experian's partnering like paying Flau'Jae to be the face of it. Like it seems like a win for everyone. And I think like I don't know too much, obviously don't know too much about Forgive Co, but hopefully like it's legit and up and up. Like it's easy for people to like for however they're gonna execute this, like it's gonna be done in a way that is good for the people involved, but also like from Flau'Jae's standpoint, like actually going to be good that it's going to keep her name in good graces, right? I think that's important, right? Because when you're doing something like that, especially at her age and her at this stage in her career, like to be something, be a part of something like that, that's designed to help some people, and then if there's any inkling that it doesn't do that, like that would be really bad.
Yeah.
But
I just looked up a little bit more. I didn't know they were partnering with like a third party, which I guess makes a lot of sense. I should have assumed. Um, but they're a public benefit corporation, a PBC. I don't know quite what that means, but my guess is that comes with like some sort of certification process or like certain level of transparency you're required to have, which makes me think that they like might have a little bit more trustworthiness. And then the other thing I just noticed was for every LSU victory in the Women's March Madness, relieve Women's March Madness, Experian will relieve an additional $100,000 in consumer debt.
yeah.
So it's very cool. It's like not just the 5 million, but
Interesting to see too, like if there's any like the process behind the scenes to allow her to be in LSU gear. Like usually from an NIL standpoint, unless it's a partner of the university too, like there's got to be some kind of conversation outside of that, like because otherwise she wouldn't be able to be appearing in her jersey and stuff like that. So
Mhm, mhm.
overall, like I think it's a lot of things at play here. Obviously, NIL is still like fairly new conceptually, considering how much people have been doing marketing and branding, like in general, for decades, for 100 years plus, right? Like, so the idea of NIL is still new, but the ways that people continue to get creative to figure out ways to touch multiple, like have multiple touch points and multiple streams that like actually help accomplish business objectives for multiple entities, I think is something that people can get creative with. And I think this is an example, a huge example of that, especially if LSU as an athletic department has to be involved too, with the fact that they're able to use the marks and logos. So you got Flau'Jae herself, LSU as an athletic department, Experian, and this Forgive Co. group, like all coming together. and an activation that wouldn't be possible without NIL. So I think that's the point that I'm trying to make is like people are still exploring ways to maximize this opportunity with these student athletes. So one, dope that it also is a women's athlete because I think that we've talked about this on the show plenty of times about the moment that women's sports is having, especially women's basketball. So happy to see that continue. And then two, leading into our big picture point for this episode, the timing of it is obviously connected to, as you mentioned, it's March Madness. So March Madness is here. Let's get into a little bit of conversation. I feel like we're gonna have to do multiple episodes about March Madness because it's only the not even. I mean, we're just gonna cover some stuff from conference tournaments, but like the tournament stuff doesn't start till tomorrow. So like we got 3 weeks of madness. I don't know if we're gonna talk about it every week, but let's just start right now. Like let's just see what we got.
We'll definitely have at least a part two,
All right.
maybe a part three for the finals.
So the first thing I want to talk about, because it is relevant to us, because we've experienced this before, like the business of conference tournaments, specifically from a standpoint of having people at the games, is such a challenge. And you can win, but like as a conference, right? Like you're responsible for trying to figure out how to maximize a week or maybe a little bit longer than a week of games where you have no control over who's going to play in it. You can't market that. You can only market the tournament itself. And you got to get creative with time. Some of these games are gonna like the VCU game I watched on Friday started at 11:30 a.m. in DC, which is like who's coming to that, right? Except for diehard VCU fans, which I love. Those people, they're my people. Um, but I think it's part of a bigger conversation that I saw have happen on LinkedIn a little bit too about I think it was maybe the Sun Belt Conference. And like their tournament was super long, but they changed the format of it to make sure that the higher seeded teams wouldn't get eliminated early. One, which obviously helps to make sure that when you have your best representation of your conference in the tournament, you have the best chance to have them maybe win a game or two if you're lucky to get money back for the conference, right? So like I think that's important to note. But then you also got to talk about home court advantages for like if you're hosting, like if you're even if you're not hosting at your home venue, but you're hosting in your home city, like how do conferences make those decisions about where they should take the tournament? Because how does that affect like what teams are good affects where we're going to go because we want to make sure we maximize attendance and maximize like the value you can provide for the whole conference for our sponsors and partners. But at the same time, it's got to be neutral, but does it have to be neutral? Like, for example, I'm down here in Virginia. The MEAC tournament was in Norfolk. Norfolk State won, which was heavily favored. I think they might have been the one seed. Both their men's and women's teams won the tournament, and they're going to the NCAA tournament. So, like, that's a big deal. Like, those conversations are hard to have, but it's an interesting mixture of things you have to make decisions as a conference to figure out what's best for the conference. Because ultimately, you want to have your building filled. You want it to look good on TV because it's a representation. It's your conference on the highest level, on the biggest stage, leading up to the even bigger stage where you want to make sure you have a chance for the teams that you need to win. You need your good teams to have a shot to win. But also you want to have a good experience for the fans for all over the conference without it being lopsided.
Yeah. I really like the idea of like I'm struggling to think of a downside of actually not having neutral, like the earlier games
Mhm.
not being neutral, and being on home courts and giving like the higher seeded teams a home court advantage for the first game or two. But also I struggle with that a little bit because if they're getting like buys, you're giving like your four seed a home court advantage. Like maybe that doesn't matter as much. But even still, like you're engaging fans again by having it at home. You might make more money on that game. Gonna have better attendance. I don't know. I think it'd be super cool to see like one of the power conferences try out this model and see how it goes.
I mean, those
Um,
guys aren't going to do it because they already have so much money tied into it. Like, I mean, I feel like, I mean, to your point, it is like, I think the Big Ten first game was like Rutgers and Minnesota in Indianapolis. So I'm like, I didn't watch that game, but I can't imagine that the attendance was great, even though Rutgers had the two freshmen on the team who everyone was excited about all year, and their team did not perform well. So maybe people still came to see them, but that's beside the point. Like I feel like it definitely makes a lot of sense to me for some of the smaller mid-major conferences where you got to at least have, your first couple rounds on campus, give people another reason to be excited. The other tough part too, Jules, right? Like we know this. Another challenge though, if you're going to do that, a lot of schools are on spring break this championship week. So like
Mm.
students there, like, so again, there's no clear-cut answer. Everything like varies between the conferences, but overall, like it's an interesting execution that everyone has to come figure out the best way to do it, like to maximize the moment. And I'm sure conferences have to be a little bit like show a little bit of favoritism to put it in a place where they know the teams that are likely to bring people have sort of an easier way to get there.
Yeah, or even just geographically, even if you're not thinking about like the teams that are better or have bigger fan bases, just like make it geographically make sense. Like the ACC has three teams in North Carolina, so it makes sense to have the tournament in North Carolina. Four.
NC State,
Oh, NC State. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, NC
I
State,
totally forgot about NC State. Duke, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, then they have two in Virginia and one in South Carolina. So it like makes sense to be in North Carolina. I know that the conferences now, like a lot of them are more geographically separated. So who knows? But at minimum, I think that is like should be a key priority. Because all of those seven teams could travel pretty easily.
yeah,
Um, Speaking of conference realignment and implications on March Madness, the SEC this year is insane.
crazy, crazy.
They had a record high 14 teams, which A, I think speaks to the size of it, but B, to the talent. And then, like, historically, two strong basketball conferences, the Big East and the ACC, have like maybe record low or if not record low, just like a very low number of NCAA bids. So
Yeah, I think
kind of a crazy year for the tournament.
the SEC thing is a big deal because it just shows that they're trying to like show that they're more than a football conference, but also just to show that they're the best conference in general, like in everything. I think that to me is what the SEC's goal is, just to win everything all the time. Like, um,
If this were 2 years ago and student athletes were still students, I would say they're good at everything except school. Because I've always had beef with the SEC for like not even pretending to have their athletes be students. But that doesn't really matter anymore. So, um, but I get, yeah. I mean, now it's like kind of undeniable.
yeah,
They're the best conference in both
and part of that has to do with, like you said, conference realignment. They have a lot of teams because they've also grown. So like,
because they're a huge conference.
yeah,
Yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma are new to the SEC this year. This year, yes. So
Yeah, I think so.
those are two schools that were in the Big 12 last year that are now in the SEC. But in that same vein, I saw a clip that Rick Pitino was talking to what's the Pat McAfee, and he was basically like he mentioned that he's been pushing or there's been conversation like people suggesting that Big East and ACC basketball should merge, which I think it's a great idea, but would definitely help both of those conferences kind of compete from a basketball standpoint with, you know, having schools like St. John's and, especially since you got Syracuse, right? Syracuse left and is in ACC now. So to bring that rivalry back with all those schools would be great, especially for them in St. John's and Syracuse and Georgetown for sure. But who knows?
I mean, Pitt, Pitt left. Pitt still had the Syracuse rivalry, but Trying to think if Pitt had any rivalries with like now Big East teams, probably not. But like Notre Dame is in the ACC for basketball, and there's like a Georgetown Notre Dame thing. Like it would bring back some classic rivalries.
I was at Duke versus Georgetown in 2010 with Barack Obama and Joe Biden hanging out. Like that was a big deal. Like that game was huge.
Yeah.
Speaking of the
Uh,
ACC, you got something else you want to say? No.
no, I was gonna get off topic.
All
I
right.
mean, I will. Whatever. We do this all the time. Quickly, um, these conference realignments. It's so interesting. And I'm just gonna make this like little prediction. We're gonna end up with like essentially a league structure. And honestly, I can see teams getting like relegated and promoted between conferences in the same way that they do in like European football leagues. But maybe not as formal of a structure. Because I was just reading about how recruiting is changing with like NIL and the new conferences. Like high major Division I teams are not recruiting out of high school anymore. They're recruiting from other D1 schools, D2 schools. D2 schools are looking at JUCO and like JUCO and maybe bad D1 schools are the only ones looking at like high school or something. Um, so anyway, I think that like the conference realignment tied to that is going to also become just like a structure, like a tiered structure of your
But
best teams are all in one conference, your next best teams are all in the next conference. Like it's just going to be tied to performance, I think.
but I think I think what you're describing sets up more of a instead of that actual structure being officially implemented, it'll just be unofficially. Like
No, that's what I
it'll,
think. Yeah, I don't think it'll be official, but
it'll serve as basically like the farm teams for the big schools. So like
right.
you get recruited and out of high school and you got JUCO or D3, D2 options to prepare you to go to mid-major if you're good or Power Four if you're great. And then you continue to move up through that process until you've exhausted your eligibility and then you're done. And then you either go overseas or you go to the NBA.
But I also think we'll see it with like teams. Like if let's say like Stanford is in the ACC right now. If Stanford puts together really good football and basketball teams for the next 5 years, will they start talking with the SEC about joining the SEC? And if who's in the SEC that's like is Vanderbilt in the SEC? Like Vanderbilt hasn't had a great football or basketball team pretty consistently for a while. Like, are they going to get relegated to the ACC at some point? Like, I can see this type of thing start to happen too, where there's like an unofficial structure
But the problem with that,
for
I
the
agree,
members too.
I agree with what you're saying, and I think that it makes sense. But the problem with that makes it complicated is it have to coincide with the length of the TV deals with the conferences. So like you can't like if I'm Stanford
Mhm.
and I'm in the conference and I'm betting on this ACC money from the TV deal, you can't kick me out without there being some kind of conversation of the fact that unless there's already some written agreements that said if you don't do X by or if you're not this good, like I feel like that language has to already exist. Like it can't
Yeah.
we're just gonna say, oh, we're gonna vote for you to leave the conference without there being some type of financial compensation.
Well, and maybe it will only happen as TV deals expire. Like maybe it won't be an annual thing where teams can get quote unquote
Right.
relegated or promoted, but like maybe it'll be every 5 years. There's like a big restructuring where all the teams who have been historically underperforming for the last 5 years are relegated or whatever. I don't know if I like want this to happen or if I think that's a good thing. It just feels like the direction we're going.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for that aside. That has just been on my mind like so much lately. And I feel like it ties to everything, like not just marketing stuff, but also like as a fan. Um,
Okay. Quickly back
all
to
right.
UNC. Talking about ACC. Um, not going to speak on this a lot, but UNC. The big story is UNC snuck in as like literally the last team to make the field. Obviously, there's controversy there because people don't like. people don't think that UNC's record against the best teams was great. Me as a childhood UNC fan, I'm happy to see them in there, but I also will champion the fact that they have the best net ranking of all the like 8 teams that they people were saying are the last four and last four in and last four out. Even though they didn't beat the teams that they played that were good, they still beat all the teams that were the second level. But from a marketing and branding standpoint, don't think that this officially went into the decision, but it's always good to have blue blood teams like UNC in the tournament. I think this is in my recollection, obviously, like I remember the very first four was VCU going to the Final Four back in 2011. I don't think that since then there's been like I'll have to go back and look, but I don't remember there being any blue blood teams. And when we say blue blood, we're talking Duke, UNC, Kentucky, Kansas. That's it. Really? Anyone else I'm forgetting? I think those are the blue blood college basketball teams. I don't think any of them have been in the first four since it started. I could be
Do you
wrong.
want to add UConn to that?
I don't think UConn is a blue blood.
Yeah, there's kind of like a second tier of another couple of schools, but
Like second tier is like I'd say like Michigan, maybe like
yeah. Yeah,
Michigan.
there's kind of like a second tier, like a high second tier, but
Okay.
I think you're kind of right with those first four you mentioned.
Because the I know this because the top five winningest programs, which includes Temple, by the way. Um, and
That's crazy. I did not know that.
the other four are here. Top five winningest NCAA basketball teams. Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina. Oh, Syracuse jumped over Temple.
I was gonna say, like, my next wave is like Syracuse, UConn,
Michigan
Michigan,
State.
Michigan State. Like, honestly,
Florida.
maybe like a UCLA.
UCLA should be in the blue bloods, but they had such a drop off between like the 90s and now. Like,
Yeah, no, yeah, no, for sure. Because I was gonna have Villanova too, which like maybe 7 years ago you might have agreed with, but like not so much lately. I don't know. Anyway, another irrelevant conversation.
but yeah, so basically, good to have UNC in there. Like, my point is, here, let's go. Let's check that stat real quick. MCA first. Okay, first four. All right, first four. What? So 2011, VCU, USC, Clemson, UAB, UNC Asheville, Arkansas Little Rock, UTSA, 12, 13, 14, Tennessee, NC State, no, 15, Dayton, Hampton, man, 16, Michigan was in it in 2016.
I don't
Uh,
know what you're counting. I lost the thread.
Syracuse was in it in 2018. This is the first four teams.
Mm. I do think, I mean, for a while there, I was like pretty convinced that Syracuse was being let into the tournament on a similar thing, like the brand.
Mhm.
And like, if they make it, there's a good chance of them like winning a few games, going on a little bit of a run. Um, I don't like you said, I don't know that this happens. I'm willing to bet money that it happens. Like I'm willing to bet money that brand is a part of like the deliberations. Oh my God.
The real, like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it is or it isn't, or if they're, I don't think anyone's gonna say it. But the reason why there's so much controversy beyond the fact that they got in is like the AD Bubba Cunningham is the head of the committee.
Mm.
So they really made it a point during the selection show to have an interview with him, and I think the second chair, Keith Gill, my guy who used to be the athletic director at Richmond, and they both made it a point to say we had serious talks about this like days ago when we had them on as the last team in. But when it was voted on, Bubba wasn't allowed to be in the room. So that's what they said. You got to take them for their word. Okay.
I think that's the right move. Like they're trying to avoid the bias, but it doesn't mean it's not there in the people who aren't him, you know. But whatever. Um, all right.
All right, let's get into some money talk. It was announced last week that the inventory for advertising for both CBS and TNT for March Madness is sold out. So it'll be interesting to see if there's like what commercials come out of those ad partners. Most of the ad partners that they've had for years are back. Capital One, Buffalo Wild Wings, those guys, the usual Coca-Cola. Um, Already seen a few of the Capital One ads with Chuck and Spike Lee and Samuel Jackson, which I think is such an interesting like group to keep pushing out there for like I don't even know. This has got to be like 10 years in a row by now, right? Like who's their target for these commercials? Like are like who's signing up for Capital One cards that is excited to see Chuck and Magic Johnson and Spike Lee? That is the question I have.
I don't know, but I'm thinking it has to be working. I don't know. Every company in the world right now is like facing the challenge of measuring their brand advertising. And it's not easy. I've had so many, like, as someone who works in marketing and particularly like trying to measure ROI of like marketing dollars, like, I think about this a lot. It's hard to measure, but
Mhm.
I imagine that, like, if they didn't have some evidence it was working, they wouldn't be doing it still.
That's why those people get paid the big bucks, and we're just on the internet talking shit.
Okay. All right. I, you've seen a lot of this already. You, like, have kind of started to get some of this messaging and whatever. And I commented today or yesterday that I have seen so little March Madness anything. It's been like so outside of my awareness lately. Um, and I think that there's a big gap. And we talk about this in like a lot of episodes. We end up talking about how different partnerships can help you get like reach different audiences or get exposed to like get into like a realm or whatever where you're like gaining additional viewers. Um, I don't think March Madness and or ESPN is like doing this super well. And I say that because if I hadn't like actively sought outside of the ESPN sphere of influence, like including like the channel, the app, the bracket challenge, their social media, I think I've seen like literally nothing about March Madness. So like outside of ESPN and the March Madness like socials, I've seen nothing, which means they're doing very little. Maybe they're doing more and it's just like I'm not the target audience,
Right.
but I'm not seeing anything that is like using partnership marketing, influencer marketing, out of home advertising. Uh, I'm not seeing like endemic brands running March Madness ads yet on social platforms or other channels or anything like that, like using athletes or teams or whatever to like, eventually you start getting those like, cutting down the net, like striving for greatness type of ads that are like not necessarily promoting March Madness, but they're like sponsors or whatever. Like I'm not seeing any of that yet. Which I guess the brackets or like the selection just happened yesterday. So maybe it's too early, but I feel like by this time, like the whole country is kind of like starting to get pushed in this direction to develop some excitement. And so far this year, I just like haven't seen that.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it because I was embedded in championship week this week, partially because of Duke UNC, partially because VCU was good and they won their conference championship. So I watched all three of their games. So I watched those on two different channels. So I watched Duke and UNC on ESPN. VCU's first game on Friday was on USA Peacock. And then the second game and the championship game were on CBS Sports Network, and then CBS. So the CBS is obviously the partner, the host of the whole thing. So like I got a ton of stuff from watching that broadcast. Um, but then I watched the selection show, and then I watched the ESPN show after the selection show. I mean, I like definitely feel like I'm different than you because
Like
I'm,
our
I'm getting in it, but I'm not getting anything that's like outside of the ordinary of like I'm actually just watching the content, and there's not a lot that needs to be done to reach me because I'm already watching it.
I sometimes struggle with this podcast because I really am trying to pull myself out of like we pay attention to this not only because we're like big sports fans, but also because we like care about it.
Mhm.
I often am trying to pull myself out of being that person to be like, how does like a normal average consumer view all of this and like how are they interpreting it? I feel like I actually am maybe more reflective of like the average consumer this week.
Yeah.
Uh, where like I was watching other sports, like I was watching NBA, but I also like Pitt basketball ended their season terribly, so they lost in the first game of the ACC tournament. So I wasn't watching a ton of that. Like I was just busy this week. Concerned by what's happening politically, so my mind is elsewhere. So I feel like I might be more reflective of just like an average consumer. Um, and I've seen nothing. And I'm like, away, if you wanted to be pulling people in and maximizing profits, and especially like we know like women head of households are like chief buying officers. Like you should be pulling in women. like I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of it. And we've talked before like I think a bunch of brands around the Super Bowl did a really good job of this. Like Nike's doing a good job of this. Even like Lululemon, I feel like has been doing a good job of this lately. Like I just feel like there's a lot of brands who are doing a really good job finding kind of non-traditional ways to reach people.
Yeah.
And like using some more innovative marketing channels, but like it does not seem like March Madness is doing that at all.
I mean, as much as I watch college basketball and consume college basketball from Thursday night until yesterday evening, I have not watched TV at all today. I'm going to say two things. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant first. The first thing is like, yes, I did watch TV this morning. I watched ESPN while I did my Monday morning workout. And do you know what the first story was on Get Up on ESPN?
I only do because you put it on your Instagram story.
The first story on Get Up is two NFL wide receivers signing their contracts overnight. We're not leading the show with college basketball. Like, I turned it off. And I went to Sports Center and was talking about it. So like I don't want to get so that was one rant thing. But like my point is I haven't really watched a lot of basketball today when I feel like today is probably the day a lot of those things that we're saying that we missed are getting pushed out. The only thing that I've seen that was on the internet, and partially because I'm connected with two people who work at Under Armour. So I think I saw it on their pages or they've shared it, but they did put out a really cool spot featuring Dawn and South Carolina's team about like just quieting the noise and or like something about the haters or something like that. But it was good. And it was like to your point, exactly what we're saying is missing is like the content of showcasing the teams, getting people excited about this time of year, which is about going on a run. So other than that, to your point, that's all I've seen. And but the point that we're making here is either there hasn't been any of it or it's not hitting us, it's not being targeted in the right way where like you got to catch. I should be an easier catch than you, but even I'm not getting the content either. But I haven't watched
And
TV.
I should be an easier catch than most Americans, even if my sports consumption is like down this week compared to 2 weeks ago. Like I still follow a lot of the teams. I'm still like looking for or the whatever brands. I'm still like looking for it to some degree. I'm still watching like I'm watching Court of Gold on Netflix, which like that could be part of it. I'm on Netflix, which is ad free as opposed to like any of the other streaming platforms where I have like the ad version. um yeah, I don't know.
But I want to make sure we
Um
hammer home the point that we tried to make earlier when we are talking on text is like, especially from a women's basketball standpoint, we expect there to be a little bit more creativity in the partnerships and influencer marketing, leveraging those tactics to touch people like you,
yeah.
really specifically continue to grow and hammer home the women's basketball game outside of just relying on ESPN.
Also, not, yes, women's basketball, also not even just women's basketball, because we just saw how creative brands can get now, schools can get now with the like players being allowed to participate in like NIL deals like Experian, Flau'Jae, LSU, Forgive Co, all collaborating. Like there are some really interesting ways to be engaging people right now. Um, with like the freedom that the athletes have, and I'm not seeing any of it. Um, all right. Do we want to shift overall to women's basketball a little bit?
Sure. I mean, the big thing that I notice in conversation about people reacting to the bracket is just the major thing is the conversation about Juju and Paige being on a collision course to meet before the Final Four, which is kind of a, I mean, it's still they're still gonna have them, they're still gonna meet hopefully, but it's obviously meeting in the Final Four is a bigger deal. But I think that speaks to a bigger point that's part of the conversation about, what Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark had last year. And, we shared that a video from Bomani Jones kind of talking about the rivalry aspect and how that helped to hype everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing I'll say about his so he in his video he mentioned how the ratings are up a few points on ESPN, which I think is good. And I think it shows that there's still some sustainability that the excitement from last year carried over, even though the two main figures of that left and went to the WNBA. But I don't think that he referenced the Fox ratings, which is important to that conversation because both Juju and Paige play at schools that have games on Fox instead of ESPN because they're at Big Ten and Big East are Fox partners. So it'd be interesting to see if that's different, if that's up or down. It's
Yeah.
it was up because they said that the game that we talked about earlier, the UConn USC game, was like the most watched game in years. So
Um, I actually think going back a little bit to your point on Juju and Paige likely meeting in the Elite Eight instead of the Final Four, like I actually don't see that as a bad thing. I think there'll be a lot of hype. I think the part I like about it is like they're more likely to meet. I feel like the chances of one of them losing before the Final Four and then that game never happening are higher in the Final Four than it is in the Elite Eight. Um, so like you're more guaranteed, not guaranteed by any means, but like more guaranteed that ratings bump from that game. I'm also thinking like I'm watching Court of Gold right now, so my mind is back on the Olympics. But like the Serbia US game, which is like maybe one of my favorite basketball games I've ever watched, was not the final in the Olympics. Um, but I probably remember it as the final. So like good basketball is good basketball. Like you're gonna watch it and enjoy it, even if it's not like in the final. So I don't know that it matters. Something I saw this week that I kind of want to get your thoughts on because I thought it was super interesting was like the women's basketball season ends a week earlier than the men's. They wrap up their conference tournaments before the men's even start, or they're like on the same day or something. So like the women's like March Madness tournament could have started last week.
it's,
Um, and
I've,
some people are saying like that would be better. Like let them get all the ratings, let there like not be so much competition between like which games do you watch. Um, like I don't know, you're not sharing as much viewership. I thought that was like a compelling idea.
yeah, it's weird. So it's not the case for all of them. It's because it's conference by conference. So like for example,
Some of them are longer.
CAA does it opposite. So
The men are first.
and the men were done on Tuesday, and the women just finished yesterday. Shout out to William and Mary going to the tournament for the first time in history, I think, maybe. But know some people over in that crew. So excited for them. But yes, so that would require them to standardize it, which I don't think that's a bad idea, but I think that to that point is like not all of them do it the same way, so it just depends. And I also think that has a lot to do with where they're played again too, right? Like, because you got to coordinate venues and you got to coordinate travel and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think conferences that do it where they're in the same location, I think they have something that I think probably makes a lot more sense too, right? Can you have them like 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 the MEAC does it? I think the American does it, like where it's literally they're in the
I
same
think
venue and they go back to back.
I
Or
think they're doing it though, if I'm being so honest. Like I think that's like purely for budget. Like I
yeah,
don't think that's marketing strategy. I think that's budget. Um, but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
Um,
they had started. I mean, it's such a weird dynamic because you can't replicate the energy that the men's tournament gets on Thursday, Friday. Like that's just such a it's almost a national holiday, just like the Super Bowl or the day after the Super Bowl. Like it's just it is what it is. So either you're gonna try to like create like to your point, like yeah, you want to give them the Thursday, Friday before, like is that gonna work? Maybe. Or I don't know. It's complicated.
I mean, I'm not denying that. We certainly like can claim to know everything, but I'm sure there's people asking these questions all the time and actually trying to answer them for their jobs. But we are here as armchair CMOs, so we're going to talk about them anyway. Um,
I mean, but could you even do that too? Like, could you do it in the same like do them at the same time? Like, figure out how to coordinate the locations where you have more host sites. I think one thing that's different too, though, that I think some of at least I know in the past, I haven't looked at the bracket to see what it is this year, but like historically, I remember there being some of the higher seeds in the women's tournament are hosting their games like in their home venues.
mm,
I feel like they do that on purpose to make sure that those teams have, a better chance, which I think makes sense for like the sake of trying to make sure they continue to have those teams continue to win. But that is something to think about. Like if you could have more host sites and have it so like you have the women play or like on a Thursday you could alternate games. Like there's a women's game, then a men's game, then a women's game, then a men's game, and have that go like have both of the tournaments start on Thursday, Friday. Like that'd be a shit ton of basketball. But
you might need to start a day early to alternate. Like you might need to start Wednesday.
it's also like doing what I just described is also not going to work when you have two different media partners.
True.
Like they're not gonna collaborate.
I would be interested to see if they ever move women's basketball to a different season. Like the WNBA plays over the summer. Like what if they moved women's college to the fall or spring?
They have to compete with it with football, which is
Then spring. What college sport do we watch in spring?
but then you but then you also open yourself up to Title IX conversation because it like there's this level of it needs to be as close to being the same, but we have to make
But
sure.
I think there's other sports that are played at different seasons. I don't know about the college. I
Volleyball,
don't know. I
volleyball.
don't know about the college level, and I don't know about D1, but I can see like D3 women's tennis being played at a different time than D3 men's tennis, or like volleyball, or I think
Well,
there's like sports like that that are sometimes played at different seasons.
volleyball is the only one I can think of that actually exists right now. Because like right now is men's volleyball season, but women's volleyball season is in the fall.
And yeah, I could see. I think, I mean, tennis, I know in some areas high school is different. I don't know about at the collegiate level, but they do it. I don't know that that's much of like a Title IX issue. Um, what other sports exist? I don't know, but
All
I
right.
know what other sports exist. I just can't think of any other examples. Um,
All right. Before we go, you gotta pick somebody. You gotta pick a winner for both the men's and women's. Go.
oh God. The men's I want to see UConn. I don't know if it's like going to be, but I want it to be. I don't know why. Like actually, like that surprises me to say. I just want Paige to have a title. Because she's played for like 6 years or something. Um, and men's, I picked Florida. That's who I put in my bracket. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know that there's like somebody I want. I think I just don't want it to be Duke.
Gotcha. For the women's, I'm gonna say I think South Carolina's gonna get it together. They took a really tough L to UConn, and then did they win the SEC tournament? Yes, they did. So important that like they took that L to UConn like last month. I think they that woke them up. I don't think they're gonna mess around in the tournament. I think they're gonna be fine. On the men's side, I would love to see UConn do a three-peat. Watch the E60 story on Bobby Hurley. I mean, not Bobby Hurley, on Danny Hurley.
Mhm.
Super insightful. Like I know Danny Hurley's kind of he's a character and people are hot and cold on him, but I actually met him and he was cool. I met him when he coached Rhode Island and they came to VCU. But the story that he told about just growing up in that household, his dad was a coach. Obviously, his brother was great at Duke, and then his brother went to the NBA. I had no idea that his brother almost died in a car accident, which kind of like helped their story too, or helped tell that story, or helped like shaped him to be who he is today. But anyway, I don't think that UConn's gonna do it. I would love to see it for the historic. It's so crazy that I'm saying that I would love to see UConn get a three-peat when I was absolutely against Kansas City getting a three-peat, but it's a little bit different. It's a little different. But my pick is actually Florida. Uh, which crazy that we're thinking the same thing because that's that's very it's very unusual. That's the whole point of this podcast is that we don't think.
That's true. But we often disagree.
But yeah, excited for
So you
Florida.
would think
Go ahead.
this is the first year you're like ever allowed to make a bracket and like submit it somewhere.
I've done the tournament challenge, but I like you just can't win any money. Like I don't even know if I will. Maybe I will. But I was gonna say I'm excited about Florida. One of the assistant coaches, Carlin Hartman, good dude. He used to be at Richmond before I got there, but then we were together at Rice for a little bit, and I've kept in touch with him. His son is actually growing up and about to be like a legit baller too. So he's been a great assistant at a bunch of programs, and happy to see him get his shine as a lead assistant. Hopefully, they can win the national championship. That'd be good for him. Maybe gets a head coaching job soon. So that's why I'm picking Florida for my man Carlin. Um, and they're really good. And I don't think UNC is going to do it. That's actually the team that I root for. I'm hoping for VCU to make a run, but I probably don't think they're not going to win the national championship. So yeah, Florida. Let's see what they can do. We probably just jinxed them.
Now that you said that, yeah, I don't think we had. You can't even bring up the word without jinxing someone. Whatever, we'll see. I last year came in first place in all of my groups that I was in. So
That's because the people that you do these with don't know sports.
that's completely false, actually. I off air will tell you who's in my groups.
Okay.
But like people who know sports for sure. So,
All right, that sounds good. All
all
right,
right.
Florida. Florida is gonna win. Bam.
Also, ew, wait, hold on. What? You think I can only win against people who don't know sports? I should have been so much more offended by that. Fuck you. That was so rude.
Because we talked about how you're friends with the your NBA friends are. Anyway, let's not get into this. This is an offline conversation.
Okay. Great first episode back, Vaughn. We'll talk next week.
All right, see you guys later.
Bye.